So welcome to another homebrew edition of Beans, Brews and Bread, and today we're looking at mash and how we mash the grains to get the sugar to make the alcohol. So we'll start today with measuring the water out. Obviously measuring jug's handy. You can also use a set of scales which go up high enough. You can put the pan on the top of the scales and weigh the water in until you get to the correct amount. On this particular recipe, and I'll just check my recipe which I've got over here, we'll be starting with 6.23 litres of water, and once we get that in the pot we'll be trying to get it up to approximately 67 degrees centigrade. So far we've got 6 litres of water in here, just adding the final 230 millilitres. And having put that on, we'll start the heat. And we'll add a Campden tablet that will help, as I say, knock out the chlorine from the water. Just the one, should be more than sufficient. I'll be using this colander inside the main pan because it does help provide some height to the bag. If you were putting this just inside with the bag, then it would be in contact with the base of the pan. The idea is to try and keep the mash when it's going at a constant temperature as far as you can. Hence why we've got the electric thermometer in the mash to check the temperature. But this will make sure that if you do have to add any heat after you've put the bag in, it's not going to burn on the bottom of the pan. So we'll add this to the pan now. Hope that we've got enough space and I'm not going to have any water go over. No, we should be okay. As I say, we're going to only be putting about a kilo of malt in, about 1 kilo 100 grams, 1.1 kilograms of malt in here, so this shouldn't really exceed the capacity of this pan, but they do try and get the biggest pan you possibly can find for brewing the bag brewing, because as I say, you really want to avoid any boil overs or sticky work going over your cooker top, because that will obviously cause problems in cleaning and mess. So we'll add our thermometer to the pan. I have to set it as low as we possibly can so you can get as much of the probe into the water as possible. Also just make sure you don't get anything caught up or anything similar. That's just gone in, and that's gone in nicely. Obviously we're starting with ice cold water from the tap, so it will take a while for this to get up to temperature. We are looking for about 76 degrees based on the recipe. Because when the grains go in, they're going in cold, so it will reduce the temperature. The idea being you want to try and aim for about 66 degrees centigrade on the mash, and that for as long as you are prepared to keep it going at that temperature. You get a very good conversion of the malt into sugars from anywhere from about 20 minutes with the modern malts that are around today. But traditionally it's kept for about an hour at 66 degrees so that you can get as much conversion out of the malt as possible. The benefit of this way of going about home brewing is that it's relatively simple. You can make it as complicated or as simple as you like, and as long as short as you like. I tend to go for an hour, but you can choose to go for a shorter period if you wish. We may actually take a reading after 30 minutes and see what the gravity is, to see what our expectations are. At the moment we're just reading about 21 degrees centigrade. Hopefully you can just see that. We'll just now wait for the temperature to bring the water up to about, as I say, 75-ish. I tend to find that at this time of year things are a lot colder than you expect. It's probably better to overshoot rather than undershoot when you're mashing in, so about 75 degrees put the malt in and see where you end up. You can always leave it to, obviously, equalize the temperature. It's a good idea to get your hops weighed out in good time for your additions later. So on this particular recipe, the bittering hops, we're using a Target. These are 10% alpha acid, and for this recipe we're needing only 4 grams, which is a very small amount, but it is only 5 litres of beer. So what we need to do is add 5 grams, 3.8 there, only a tiny little bit more. This is how they tend to come, vacuum sealed, compressed. These are whole leaf hops, these are not pellets. I like to use these because they tend to create a bit of a filter bed for clearing the beer off later, but we'll try and get to slightly over, but these are slightly under what the calculation is for this beer, so that's not too bad. So having weighed out the bittering hops, we now need 7 grams of the aroma and flavour hops. This is East Kent Goldings, so we need 7 grams of these. These are not quite as compressed as the bittering ones, and they do have a bit of stalks and a few odds and ends in there as well. We're looking for about 7 grams of the aroma and bittering. It's about 7 point something. We'll go for a little bit more. But yes, that's the aroma and flavour hops. We have got another addition later on towards the end. We'll just put 2 grams in of these same hops, just to finish at the same time as putting the Irish moss in. Just a few words about cleaning and preparation. Anything at this stage really needs to be just clean. So clean jugs, spoons, the pan needs to be clean. The bag, obviously, best to clean as well. Any thermometers, anything similar, bowls, measuring cups, that kind of thing, really should just be clean. At the point at which you choose to cool the wort after you've finished boiling, everything really needs to be as sterile as possible. And for that, really, you need proper cleaning and sterilising chemicals for that. There's a good one which is a broad cleaner and sanitising agent, which is sodium metabisulphite, which is okay as a starting chemical to use. It's not overly harsh or acidic or alkaline in terms of cleaning or sterilising equipment, and it's a good starting point. You can get it from most homebrew suppliers, or even larger hardware stores like Wilco's in the UK carry a lot of homebrew equipment and cleaning chemicals and sanitising chemicals as well. You can get really quite basic kit which will stand you in good stead for quite a long time in terms of thermometers, hydrometers, measuring jars, one-handled spoons and other equipment, including fermenting buckets and demijohn glass jars for fermenting with stoppers and airlocks, and they're a good source of equipment to get just to do a few small batch stovetop crew in the bag. It's worth just stirring before you put any grains in, just to make sure the temperature reading is correct, because obviously you can get hot and cold spots. But at the moment this is reading 68 degrees C, so we're very close now to putting our malt in. Right, we're at temperature now, so what we'll do is we'll add the malt in, and as you're doing so, it's always best to try and give it a stir, just so that you avoid any clumps, and that you can get a nice even consistency and wetting of all the malt to help the enzymes with the conversion of the sugars and the starches into sugar. So So we'll add these in now. Add about half. Give it a stir. Be careful to make sure that we're not going to overload it. And then we'll add the other half. So from here on in, it's just a question of trying to maintain the temperature around 66 degrees, ideally for an hour, but anything certainly over 30 minutes would be a good starting point if you didn't have much time on your hands and you were hoping to get a brew day done quite quickly. So from this point of view, I'm going to go for about an hour and try and keep this temperature fairly consistent at 66 degrees. It doesn't hurt to give it a stir as you're waiting for it to do go through its time. Obviously this helps to ensure even conversion, but also make sure that you're not suffering any massive temperature drops. In this case it's staying steady at around 66, so I've not had to add any extra heat to it yet, but obviously over the space of an hour it will drop some temperature and you will have to add a little bit back. In fact, actually after mixing that around, it's actually dropped down to 65, 64, so may just add a little bit of heat, but as ever, a few degrees doesn't really hurt very much. As long as you're in the ballpark of 66 degrees, it's gone back up again now, so it must have been a bit of a cold spot. Yeah, we'll convert it and do this thing. So in a way, it's a bit like making porridge. The difference being that you're trying to get the enzymes at the right temperature to convert the starches into sugars, so that the yeast can feed on the sugars and turn it into alcohol. Very simple process. People have been doing this for thousands of years. All you're doing is on top of a stove top in a stainless steel pan, as opposed to doing it over a roaring log fire in a cauldron. So we'll keep that going now. Put the heat under this a little bit because it has dropped in temperature to about 64, 63. Just give it a bit of a mix. Get the temperature back up, and it should be done very soon. So I'm going to call that done there. We stayed pretty consistent at 66 degrees, and now what we're going to do is we're going to lauter, which is basically just lifting the bag out. Now I've got this IKEA in-pot colander, and the idea is I'm going to use the other colander to support it and let the wort drop out. If you didn't have that, you could, with a pinch, put some gloves on, hold the bag, let it drain out, and then transfer it into another pot so you don't get too much mess. But I'll use this other strainer here to lift up the inner colander. Take the temperature gauge off for now. Alarm. Take the temperature gauge off and we'll let this come out and strain, letting it rest just in there. And we've got just enough clearance, just over the liquid to keep it raised, so it's not sitting inside the liquid, otherwise you won't get any more draining. If you did choose to sparge, which is putting hot water over this, you would increase your efficiency because you'd be rinsing more sugars out of the grain. But as it stands, you can just leave it at this and let it just drip for about 5-10 minutes. Just make sure that you've got sufficient room inside the main pot to take any additional sparge liquid that you put, liquor that you put on, which is basically hot water. Now, there's much debate in the brewing and baking community as to whether you should squeeze your grains once you've let most of it run out. If you've got nice proper thick rubber gloves, then you're happy to give it a squeeze, then I'll leave that to your discretion. But on this occasion, I think we'll leave it as it is. May just put a little bit of hot water over this bag just to rinse a little bit out, only a little bit, mind, because that will obviously a bit of a trade-off between getting some more sugars out and continuing to dilute your water for boiling. So I'll add a little bit more boiling water now. Right, we'll get the boil started now. Tiny little sparge there just to try and rinse a bit more out of the grains. But now we'll put the heat back on. Always handy to maybe keep the thermometer in just so we know when we're getting up to a boil. You really want to watch this really carefully at this point. As it gets to a boil, there's a chance of what we call a boil over, which is where it will just go everywhere and create a massive mess. So it's really important that you just keep your eye on it, particularly close to getting to 100 degrees. Alarm! And just to avoid any mess on the cooker top. But yeah, this is what your finished product, well, your product at this stage will look like. So thank you for watching the homebrew edition of Beans, Brews and Beds today, and the mash. Next episode will be the boil, and how we add the hops to make the flavour for the beer. If you like the content, we'd be grateful if you'd give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to be notified of the next episode or any of my other content, including the allotment tours and planting and sowing videos, then subscribe. Otherwise, thanks for joining along today. Thanks, bye.